Hello, welcome to Carissa Explains It All. I am Carissa, I explain it all, and this is the story of how I had a fight with my roommate and I made her the bad guy so that I could feel better about myself. This is my Diary of an Alchemist series in which I am detailing the last 7 years of my emotional healing, inner child work, reparenting, and shadow work journey. And I journaled through all of it and I am now going through and retelling those stories. So, what is an emotional overlay? First, I'm going to give a disclaimer I am not a psychologist or a therapist or anyone professionally trained in this field. But I am someone who's been going on this journey for the last 7 years, and this is my experience of an emotional overlay. So this is going to be a definition from what I have researched, but remember, if you want like the definition, you're gonna have to go to like an expert. So anyways, emotional overlay as I know it to be, this is something that happens to us when like if early on we experienced something that was kind of traumatic or just too overwhelming for us to understand really what was going on, and we never process through those emotions, they can kind of get stuck in our mind, like in our psyche, and also somatically in our body, in our nervous system. And for whatever reason, it was too overwhelming for us to process at that time. We did not have the skills or the resources or the know-how to understand what was happening to us, or what emotion we were feeling, or how to process and then release it and then move forward in a healthy way. So because of all that, it just sits there in our psyche and in our bodies. And over time, we will have new experiences, but because those old experiences are kind of sitting emotionally in our body and in our psyche, we kind of overlay those remaining emotions onto the current situation. So we kind of perceive this new situation through old perceptions and judgments that are based off of old emotions that we felt around a situation that felt similar to what we're now experiencing. So we kind of project what happened in the past onto the present moment. And because of this, it causes kind of an overlay reality on top of the actual reality of what's going on. We are projecting a story of what's happening based on what we're feeling, not necessarily on the actual events that are occurring. And when we do this, it makes it really hard to see a situation objectively, and it makes it hard to see someone else's perspective, like understand exactly where they're coming from because, well, we're trying to deal with what we're going through. This can cause us to feel re-hurt all over again. This can cause conflict in relationships. And essentially this emotional overlay is like having a pretend reality on top of the actual reality. And I'm going to illustrate this with the example of me having a fight with my roommate, making her the bad guy so that I could feel good about myself, because there were so many emotions that I was overlaying onto the situation. So we're going to go straight into my diary, because this is my Diary of an Alchemist. So this is the journal entry from February of 2019. To set up the story, I'm going to tell you what was going on in my life at the time. I was living in a house that I was renting with my husband, and we had 2 roommates. And one of them was like a really good friend of his that we'd been roommates with for like many years. And then one of them was a new roommate, and she was also a coworker, which I never advise that you do that. But we were living in a very expensive place, and you're just trying to make rent, and it seemed like it was a situation that was going to work out for all of us. I love the idea of like living in a synergetic household where everyone's just like coming together to live their best life and support one another and all that. So anyways, I had this idea of what it could be, and it really wasn't that. She ended up being kind of an absentee roommate, which kind of works out, right? Like if that person's like paying rent but they're not really living there, then it's like you get extra space and like extra income, but like don't have to deal with an extra person. She was fine with the arrangement. We were fine with the arrangement. But there was this point in time, February of 2019, where our bills were starting to go up for utilities like water and electricity and garbage and sewer and all of that. So I had been texting her, asking her like, hey, can we have a conversation soon? Because I want to discuss bills and utilities and what's fair. Now, granted, she's not here most of the time, so I wasn't going to be charging her like the same amount that we all were, but we needed to have a conversation to kind of like renegotiate terms and such. But she hadn't responded to my texts, and we didn't talk that much anyway, so it wasn't like she was avoiding me. It was just like that was her normal MO. But she was home one afternoon, and I was like, oh, great, I can actually like talk to her about this. And so like I knocked on her door, and she was like, yeah, just a minute. So I'm like waiting just a minute. A couple minutes goes by, and I knock again. She's like, yeah, wait just a minute. And I was like, okay. Like she was getting a tone in her voice, and it was starting to trigger me a little bit. I was like, okay, whatever. And I knocked on her door again, and she opens the door and she's like, what? And it triggered me so bad. So bad because I just had a really heightened nervous system at the time. So I didn't really know it at the time, but I was a highly sensitive person. So my nervous system is just sensitive to anything. 2, I'd been through a lot of traumatic experiences when I was younger where someone would get very angry with me and I didn't know why. I was just being myself or just talking or just asking or whatever, and they would get mad at me because it was encroaching on their time and space and energy. And sorry to be so vague, I just don't really want to name names or like get into the gist of that. Just know that that was the unresolved emotion that was stored in my body and my psyche. And so my nervous system was extremely agitated and on edge because of those experiences that I had not resolved. On top of that, I worked in customer service. So having to cater to everybody else's feelings and what they wanted from me, and then in dealing with people who would just get mad at me because they didn't like the price or they didn't like the service or whatever, something that just had nothing to do with me. I was like repeating these experiences over and over again. So this moment with that roommate where she just like yells at me, my whole nervous system just like lights up, can't handle this, dissociates, just kind of, I just tried to like stumble through talking to her. And then I don't even know what happened next. It's blanked from my memory. I didn't put it in my journal, so I don't actually know what I said to her or what she said. But she went back in her room. That's all I can remember. She went back in her room. I was pissed off. I was having a good day and I was about to run errands. And so I was just like, oh, just so mad. So like I just kind of like stomped out of the house and slammed the door behind me because yes, I was mad. Like, how dare she? She's not responding to my text. She's not giving me a moment to talk to her. She's giving me attitude. I'm not her parent, like I was just so irritated. And she had triggered this emotional response within me that felt very, very unsafe in my nervous system. So I was mad. That was a boundary that had been crossed. So of course I want to express that. I am mad. I am angry. But I did not have the skills to have a healthy conversation when I get triggered. I didn't have the skills to self-soothe myself or know that I needed to be self-soothed or valued to be self-soothed in that moment when I felt very triggered. I just reacted, right? I couldn't do anything else because I didn't have any other way of being at the time or way of processing that. Plus I was like dissociated and on edge, right? So anyways, I slam the door and I'm like walking out to my car and she comes storming out behind me, which I had not lived with someone who did that before. Like this other person who had did it when I was younger, like I just would have never slammed a door to express my anger because bad things would happen, right? So this roommate coming after me was like worst case scenario. Like she's charging after me across the front lawn. I'm like at my car. She's like screaming at me. Oh, screaming's probably an exaggeration. She's yelling at me like, what's your problem? Why are you so mad? What is it that you really wanted to talk to me about? And I just kind of froze. I was like, it's fine. I don't want to talk about it. And I just like got my car and drove away. I'm not really sure if I thought about it afterwards. It probably was like really big in my head, but I know I drove off, did my errands and came back. And like later, either that day or the next day, I was journaling to kind of process what was going on and what happened. So I'll go over kind of what was happening, what emotional overlay, what things were happening in my body and my psyche that were clouding my perception and my judgment of the situation. Like what was happening in the process of this emotional overlay, in the emotional overlay itself. We'll go over like 3 main points and there's some kind of like subcategories within that. So the first point is that I was literally completely like dissociated, shut down. I was kind of frozen, fawning, just didn't know how to respond to the situation. I could not handle someone being angry at me. It just overwhelmed everything about me. My mind, my body, everything. 2, because I was in that state, I was not able to address her in a healthy way. I think I had every right in that situation to be angry that she was being so dismissive, and this is like, we need to have an adult conversation, and she'd been avoiding my texts, and now I'm like trying to get her attention any way I can. I don't know when she's gonna be home next. So like I had every right to be angry, but I could not express that in a healthy way because 1, I didn't have the skills to talk through an argument, like at all, just didn't know like how do you talk through it. 2, I didn't have the awareness that I was actually really scared. I was angry and I thought I was just angry, but I didn't realize that there was a lot of fear underneath that. I was afraid of her being angry at me, like that triggered a lot of fear within me. So 2 was that I was angry and I was afraid and I didn't know how to process any of those. Now the thing is, in that particular moment, there's no way I could have processed that anger or that fear because those emotions came to take, that doesn't make sense grammatically, but they would take several years, many years actually, to process these very deep and complicated and complex emotions that had many other emotions tied to it, many different fears and feelings, and would require years of healing and processing and letting go and realizing like how to self-soothe and how to then have healthy conversations. So at that time, I was far away, far away from being the person that could even acknowledge what was happening, be aware of what was happening, respond objectively to what was happening. All I could see the situation was through this overlay, this cloud of fear and anger. So 3, what was happening in this emotional overlay, I did the best that I could, as we all do in any situation. Know that you can't get mad at yourself for having done what you did. You did the best that you could do in that particular situation with the pressures and the stresses and the emotions and the environment and the situation. Like, we all do the best that we can do in any given situation. And so what the best thing that I could do was dissociate, like leave my body, leave that present situation, because it wasn't safe. It was so overwhelmingly flooding my body and my mind of fear and anger. I couldn't cope. So I had to leave, like I kind of like stepped back emotionally and mentally. And then the second thing I had to do was to make sense of it, right? We have to come up with a reason for why what's happening is happening. We need a story to cling onto, a narrative that helps us to process in whatever way we can forward. And this is where that overlay comes into play. I had to come up with reasons for why she was wrong and I was right so that I could stay good in the situation. And the reason why I needed to stay good in the situation was because I needed to validate my fear and my anger, when really this is a completely separate issue. That fear and that anger needs its own validation in its own time, in the appropriate spaces. But it was coming up in an inappropriate space. Really, we're just living life, right? Like, it's just going to come up when it comes up, and then that's how we know we need to deal with it, right? But this particular situation objectively did not call for that much fear and that much anger. It was just, miscommunication. I need to state clearly what I need. She needs to respond, and I need to let her know she needs to respond, and whatever. We know we need to have that conversation. But because the two were so inextricably interlinked at that time for me, there was reality and then there was my overlay reality on top of that. I had to come up with some kind of narrative to make sense of it all, right? So this is the narrative that I came up with. I came up with, all the reasons why she was wrong was that, she's not responding to my text, she's never around, she's an icky person to live with, whatever. I'm coming up with, if you live with roommates, you make up all these reasons why, like, they're bad roommates and all this stuff, right? It's just the little things that get on your nerves. I was like, she's yelling at me like some trashy person in a reality TV show. It's gross. She's just I can't believe her behavior, right? And I needed her to be bad so that I could be good and justified in my fear and my anger. And my fear and anger should have been justified. Just, it didn't really have anything to do with the situation. Now, I think people are going to go like, well, of course it had everything to do with your situation. Yes and no, right? Like, yes and no. That overreaction that I had to this situation did not call for that massive amount of reaction. And when you have that massive amount of reaction, there's nothing wrong with you, but there's probably something deeper going on, because the situation of getting the bills addressed and figure that out doesn't call for that intensity of fear and anger. And so I didn't know it at the time because I didn't have the self-awareness at the time, but that was calling for so much more healing that was my own to deal with, right? In a different time and space. And so now it was coming up here, and I was just becoming aware of maybe this is something else that I need to become aware of, and it's maybe something I should look into healing. So as I was journaling, I was starting to realize journaling is so useful when you're going through healing, because you're validating yourself, your viewpoint, you're getting it out of your head so it's not looping over and over again. And once you've done that, there's kind of a piece of okay, where do I go from here? And so then I started thinking about and journaling about how the past several days I had been becoming aware, several days, probably several weeks at that point, maybe months, I had just been starting to become aware of law of attraction, and not really law of attraction, but seeing it as the law of mirroring. So that hermetic principle of as above, so below, as without, so within, or vice versa. That reality could possibly be a mirror reflection of what's going on internally inside of me. And so, if that is the case, because I live my life experimentally and I'll take on different theories and ideas and concepts and stuff and apply it. And if it works, it works. And if it helps me move forward or grow or love more or be more, then great. And if it doesn't, then release it and let it go. So this is the current ideology that I was like taking on and playing with at that time, was like, if this is the case, if my external reality is reflecting what's going on internally for me, then what does this say? What does this say about what's going on internally for me? I started to kind of play with this idea that I was like, well, if she was really someone that I wanted in my life, then she would respect me just like I respect her. Like, I try to do things to help her out and I expect the same. And I was like, but is that the reality of the situation? Is she my friend? I thought she was my friend, because like anyone that I'm like friendly with, I guess I just thought was a friend. I didn't really question it at the time. But I was like, she is a roommate. She is here and she is paying her portion of rent. And that's it. And any other expectation I have on her to be kind or respectful or whatever, like, you would hope that a roommate would be that, but like, there's no expectation from her other than to pay rent or to pay bills or whatever, right? And that, I mean, that situation was about that. So like, it's hard because the situations are so tied, right? But I was projecting, you know, like, she should be my friend. She should care about how I feel in a situation. She should not be mean or yell at me or whatever. But is that what she's thinking? Is that what she wants out of our relationship, out of the way that we relate to one another? You know? And so I was getting upset about an expectation I was projecting that maybe was not the reality of it. And so there was kind of some disappointment in there too. So it's kind of like realizing all these like projections or overlays I had, which were not the reality of our situation. So as I did a lot at that time, I was watching a lot of Teal Swan's videos, because she breaks down, you know, what's really happening in our emotions and in our emotional relationships to people. And she does so at an energetic level, and it's a really different way to perceive the world. Instead of just seeing it like physically, seeing it energetically and what's going on beneath the surface. So she has a website, and on this website you can do like, let the universe choose your message. It's basically a website that kind of functions like tarot, this like random synchronous kind of way of working. So this web page will generate a random video of hers, a random quote, and a random picture, I believe. And so, or a piece of artwork from her. And so I was using this a lot at that time. I would randomly generate a video to like, I was like, reflect something back to me of like what's going on regarding the energy in the situations of my life. And so I consulted this website and I got the video Emotional Overlay. I'll put the link to that video in the description below. It's called Overlay: What Prevents You from Having a Real Relationship. So I watched this video, and what I really took away from it was this idea of, you know, if this is objective reality and then we have our overlay reality, then we will make the people in our lives fit the dramatization that we believe should be happening. So we have like almost like a play happening real time in our lives. And we see the people in our lives as characters in this play, playing out their roles. And the roles that they're playing are playing out these old traumas and stories and patterns that we have, so that we're looking for resolve. We're looking to have these, not that we're looking to have conflicts, but when the conflicts happen, they're opportunities, like portals for us to like almost go through and resolve the original emotion, except that we don't see it that way. So we don't see it as a way to work through that emotion. But if we can start to see it as that way, if we can start to see that here's reality, here's our overlay, and that overlay, we are making the people in our lives the characters through which we are playing out these old stories so that we can try to find resolve, then instead I could try to see people more objectively as they are. Like, what's their truth? And what overlay am I trying to put on this situation to make them fit that, so that I can keep retelling these old patterns and stories and beliefs? And if I don't like that, then maybe I can find resolve within my own emotions and stop projecting this overlay onto them and onto this situation, and it will make me more capable of dealing with reality more objectively. Not only that, but once you start doing that and doing it more often till it becomes a habit, and you can then do that and realize like, the situation is the situation, and what's my projection of what's going on and what emotion do I need to deal with? Once you resolve that, then you're seeing reality more objectively, and you're actually more able to help the other person who's probably also putting their overlays on it. What is their overlay? How are they not able to see the situation as objectively, or from my point of view, because maybe we can't ever fully see objective reality, but like, you're more in a empowered position to resolve conflicts in your life from your point of view, from their point of view, like, because you are recognizing that there's probably a lot of like overlays on top of the objectiveness of reality. So when I started to play with this idea from this video of the emotional overlay, I started thinking, well, I have expectations that she will treat me a certain way, but she's not. So I was wondering if I was replaying this old story that I had just discovered in the last video. So in chapter 10 of my Diary of an Alchemist series, I go over the emotion code and uncovering repressed emotions. And one of those repressed emotions was efforts unreceived. And so I was wondering if this particular situation was me experiencing that repressed emotion that I'm now bringing up into my awareness, and I haven't resolved it yet, but it's coming into my awareness. Is this playing out in my hourly reality? Is it this pattern of me presenting like I'm just coming to someone with my best intentions, or not even best intentions, but just like I'm just being me, and then I get met with anger and frustration, so it feels like efforts, like I'm putting efforts towards, I don't know, relating to them or like just interacting, and it's unreceived. Not only is it unreceived, but it feels like a slap in the face. And it feels like a repeat of what I experienced early on in life that I keep experiencing in my job at customer service, and now I'm experiencing it again with my roommate. Is this an overlay of emotions that have been unresolved and is now trying to come up for me again to be resolved? And yeah, it was just very helpful to maybe take this into consideration in my perspective in moving through the world in the weeks to come. And it was a crucial turning point of being able to see how perhaps I was trying to make the people in my life into something that they weren't, like, am I really seeing, like, at that point, then I'm like, oh my God, am I not seeing my husband as clearly as he is? Am I not seeing him as the person that he is? And instead, am I seeing him as what I need him to be? And same with like every coworker I have and every customer I have. And I was like, am I making people what I need them to be so that I can resolve my emotions? And it was just this very, very interesting perspective that I started to play with. Now, just as a reminder, I treat all of my life as an experiment. So it doesn't really matter to me whether an idea has a general consensus in society. If it's an idea or a concept that will help me grow, help me heal, help me learn or become more self-aware, even if it's not adopted by most people, then I'm gonna use it. Like, it moves me forward. It makes me more expansive or more loving or more feel more empowered or whatever it is. And if it doesn't, then I let it go. And sometimes, like in my last video, I went over the emotion code. I used that system for like 1 to 2 months because it helped move me forward at the time, and then I never used it again. I use what moves me forward and accumulate what does and release what doesn't. And it's your own life. There's a quote that I love. It's your own life. Edit it as ruthlessly as you can because it's your life. It's your masterpiece. It's your creation. And so I just want to encourage you, if you end up using this idea of the emotional overlay and start to see, like, am I perhaps seeing current reality through an overlay, and what emotions are coming up? What emotions am I projecting onto the situation that may not have anything to do with the objective reality of what's going on, but more so like what's going on internally for me and coming up, what triggers are coming up for me? And really, you kind of just know if you have an overlay, if you're having an overreaction. Teal Swan also taught this idea that like an overreaction is not an overreaction. Like, whatever big feelings are coming up for you are big feelings, and those big feelings need to be validated, addressed, acknowledged, loved, healed, released, moved on. Like, they are calling for attention. The bigger they are, the more attention they need. And we're trying to use this current situation that maybe doesn't call for a big emotional reaction, but we're trying to use the situation as resolve for that big emotion. And so when we can start to see our overreactions as probably being triggered because there's an overlay here, we're expecting that this current situation is something that we've been trying to resolve and never have been able to, then we can start to separate the two. We can see reality and our overlay reality. And our overlay reality, just because it's not the objective reality, does not mean that it's not just as valid. It's one that requires our attention and our focus and our love and our care and TLC and all that good stuff. And once we do that, it dissipates. It's no longer there. So when you'll know that it's working, the work that you're doing to let go of overlays and address repressed emotions and let them go and release, you'll know that it's working because the same situation will come up and your response will be entirely different to it. And so my advice, as always, is just to be patient with yourself and to see our emotional reactions as just as valid as anything that's going on in the physical, don't try to override it with your thoughts in your mind. If it's coming up for you, it's coming up for you because it needs TLC. And once we give it TLC, it will start to dissipate and not be such a big deal anymore. Like we will have resolved what never got resolved before, and we'll learn tools and skills to move through it better in the future. And so, yeah, so overlay is just such an interesting concept, and I really needed to tell this part of the story, even though I promised I was going to talk about Conscious Life Expo in this chapter. I kind of really needed to illustrate this one because it is actually something that will come up recurring over and over and over again, and is really a perspective that I probably still use to filter through things in this world today. And have for my whole journey. So it was really a concept that I needed to go over prior to going into Conscious Life Expo. But it was also illustrative of the fact that the emotion code in the last chapter was bringing up repressed emotions, and now I am starting to see them crop up in my reality, because what you pay attention to, you know, if you believe in law of attraction, law of mirroring, will start to appear in your reality. And these, when you're on your healing journey, these are opened up as like opportunity points to address and resolve past issues, past emotions, past fears, and all that. So yeah, that's my story. I'm going to end it here. And in my next chapter, we're going to go over Conscious Life Expo, which is this big event in LA that happens every year, and I went in 2019. As always, I'm glad that you're here, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
My, oh my.